global level with international global organizations? Thank you for the question. I'll just pick maybe 1 or 2 points that are actually designed for the top corporate organizations that are listed in the securities exchanges. So like in Kenya, we have the Nairobi Securities Exchange. In other countries, the developed markets, we have the LSE in the UK. In the US, we have the New York Stock Exchanges. So these institutions have that need to be complied to. Now, the challenge we have with SMEs is connecting into these requirements when they become part of challenges when the ESG requirements are also cascaded downwards to SMEs. So SMEs, from what we've seen, need a lot of into it. We've seen a situation whereby companies just focus on the lowest price when it comes to supplying of services by SMEs, but we are saying companies should go beyond that and in their ESG program, see how they can build capacity to the SMEs that they work with. We have SMEs who have made investments in old assets that are not, I would say, environmental friendly, so they have to transition. SMEs who have shown interest and commitments to transitioning from high carbon to low carbon in support this transition. An example I would give for SMEs that we were involved in the policy submission about 2 years ago on electric vehicles. When we started off, there was a lot of resistance, but eventually we got government support. We submitted the policy to the National Assembly, and as a result of that, the next level is to go now to the trucks. So we need to build infrastructure for these SMEs who have trucks shuttling from Mombasa in the systems. And when it comes to agriculture, how do you provide solar pumps to farmers to use it for irrigation? So it's a very big, it's an interesting question you've asked, but I don't
You're doing a really good job. Is that there has to be a lot of systems that are being embedded into the startups so that they can incorporate this ESG into their growth strategies, I would say, right? Maybe I can just ask Tracy to also tie into that. What should investors be demanding or adjusting in their ESG due diligence for African startups and SMEs? And I think just tying into that, what are some of these opportunities that you see that can be taken advantage of by the SMEs and the startups to engage in this ESG-driven growth, I would say?
Thank you. Sorry. Hello? There.
Thank you so much.
So I think your question made a key point that I want to make. It's that the ESG due diligence on the investor side does need to be adapted to the local context, both to the local context, but also to the SME and startup context. So when an investor is coming in, they really need to contextualize any materiality assessment. When they're working with a company, they need to understand the local issues that the local environmental, social, governance issues that are material for those companies, and understand how that fits in this environment. Any kind of materiality assessment would always need to be sector specific, but the sector, the agriculture sector, for example, here in Africa, is not the same as the agriculture sector in more developed markets. So you need to understand that context and understand the local maturity of that sector and the business environment that they're operating in here. On the environmental side, I would suggest, pragmatism rather than perfection. Emissions data, investors, regulators, et cetera, are looking for data, but that data is not often available at the startup or SME level. It's expensive to get, the infrastructure is not in place. If the SME's been around, it's not something they're used to doing, perhaps. So really understand that this might be a journey and that you might need to work with any companies that you're investing in. And it's really important to encourage sustainable practices, get them on a journey rather than expecting 100% compliance with what you would traditionally be looking for. On the social side in Africa, this is often the most important element, especially if you're talking about impact investors are really looking for strong social credentials on job creation, on youth employment, youth entrepreneurship, working with women, women entrepreneurs, and also the realities, again, of the social sector. Informal economies are a way of life and how things are done here, and companies work with informal economies, and that needs to be accounted for and allowed and understood. On the governance side, again, be flexible. I would encourage focusing on the basics, strong governance, financial reporting, capacity building, financial controls, and then just working with the founders on integrity, transparency, and building over time. And fundamental to all of that, and I think this was the point made by my colleague on the panel, capacity building is really important, and understanding that you're not working necessarily with someone who's been working this way for a long time. It's perhaps a new area. You need to offer tools, support when you're setting and understand that those can kind of ramp up over time. So, yeah.
It's very key that we combine scalability with sustainability on both ends of the spectrum. I think that's an overaching thing that is coming out. And I want to ask you, tied to that, Charlotte, in KCB, because you do fund a lot of startups, you do provide a lot of support for them. When it comes to aligning that scalability with sustainability, especially for a business that is in the private sector, how and what is the role of, you see the role of financial and the social impact case of making sure that ESG is also driving the how, not just the how much? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So my name is Charlotte Ludi. I am the Group Sustainability Manager within KCB Group, and we have our portfolio in 7 East African countries, and we have been in this journey of sustainability from the year 2008. When we did start this journey, of course, it was a conversation that we had with our European partners, and so that is where the conversation started from. And at that particular time, in Kenya especially, the conversation was quite new. And so we were in a situation whereby we needed to actually localize whatever frameworks we were getting from the European side, to localize it to the Kenyan context. And so that meant that as a bank, the first thing that we looked into is something called environmental and social due diligence. So the financing that we are giving to our customers, how are we ensuring that the financing we're giving to them is not going to do any environmental harm and any social harm? So for us, what that meant is having continuous conversations with our customers, both on the corporate side and also the SMEs. The discussion has been a bit, a bit more conversation is required within the SME space, because regardless, they are SMEs, and because of that particular fact, there's a lot of capacity building that is required. But then, in the space of environmentals, in the space of environmental, it's a matter of identifying the environmental risks within that particular premise, whoever we are giving the facility to, and once you identify the risks, now have conversations on how you're going to mitigate that risk and turn them into opportunities. And so that takes us into the space of green financing. In the space of social, how are you engaging with your community? How are you engaging with the employees? Because retention of your employees is key, because that is how you actually manage to make sure that the business is going to be there for future. In the space of governance, what are the policies that you have in place to ensure that you have transparency within your business and you are actually you are putting in place ethical practices within your businesses? So for us, it has been very key to make sure that the customers that the bank finances has put these items in place. And it's not a matter of when we see that we do not have these practices, we are going to say no to you. We are going to put in action plans that are going to help you to get to the point of you have good ESG practices. And for us, that has been quite a good success story, whereby we have been able to see, SMEs adapt, to the requirements that we have within the ESG space, and it has been quite a good story.
Yeah, and I can see that a lot of businesses have, they're treading that line between short-term, I would say short-term returns and long-term ESG impact. And maybe I can take this to you, James, given the fact that now you're on the other side of the spectrum. How should businesses and investors look at and approach this compliance beyond what is expected of them and go beyond that? And what's the economic case from the business standpoint, seeing that you're on this other side of things as a founder and also as an executive? How do you see companies embedding sustainability in decision making in their operations?
Thank you so much, Angela. My name is James Kimani Gashiri from Daimois, which is an entrepreneur support organization. And when we talk over ESG, most economical case that I would give to the businesses, it would be as a way of risk mitigation. Because you realize whenever you have this in place, you're able to protect yourself as a business from all these challenges that come with you not complying. The other aspect is economical growth or the profitability of an organization, meaning you're able to look at more less costly practices. Because let's look at a case scenario of environmental. Perhaps you have not complied, and even before doing any business, perhaps you have not got those certifications from NEMA or any other authorizing agency, and you can always incur losses. Take, for example, the house that was just demolished the other day in Mombasa. That was a huge loss to the side of the business. Assume he or she had complied with the regulations that are set. So you find, with that aspect in place, look at also the issue of governance. When you have, let's say, an advisory or perhaps who have skills that are giving oversight on an organization, it means they're able to guide you in a better way, and then you're able to avoid some of these losses that can always incur. And also look at the aspect of also having policies in place, also ensuring that you are inclusive in all your programs. That means in the long run, because the aspiration of any entrepreneur is to have a business that is able to outlive them. So meaning a business that can stay in the long term. And also, there are also incentives that come with you being compliant. And here we are talking of carbon credits that come with you complying, or even when you are supporting such initiatives. And also look at this aspect of innovation coming in place. Because you cannot just do business the way we have been doing previously. So you always look at what are the current practices that are there and what are the opportunities that come with there. And that leads to more of economical value, adding more economical value to the businesses as compared not considering the ESG components.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And it speaks to the whole regulatory, I would say, and policy landscape in general. I think everyone in this panel is not just in operating in Kenya. There is an East African and a Pan-African element to the work that everyone is doing here. And I think we need to also have an understanding of how African regulatory frameworks are shaping these ESG expectations, I would say. And maybe I can throw this to both Julius and Bianca. What are the structural barriers that limit SME participation in ESG-linked financing? And how can they be dismantled? Because these regional policies, can they be recalibrated to just not promote but enforce the ESG accountability to business growth? Any one of you can just start.
So some barriers that exist for entrepreneurs, I'd say, is not really understanding what it is. So the regulator, for example, CMA in Kenya, is trying to embed ESG reporting in the annual reports. But when it comes down to the entrepreneur that is supposed to be reporting on this, they really have no understanding about what ESG is. It was basically just, quote unquote, placed on them. So some of these things can be broken down by the regulator, not just telling them that this should be included, but also training them as to why is it important, because we're looking at ESG not just from regulation and investing sustainably, but also what is the financial materiality of this? How does this reduce your risk as a company from operational risk to the kind of markets you can scale to? Just to pick a random example, there was an agricultural company that was not able to really penetrate the European market because of the labor rights and how they treated basically their workers. So it's small things like that that you need to start incorporating as a business to be able to scale further. So if a business does not understand that it's as basic as that, and that's what you're meant to report on, then it seems like something that they are not able to do, yet it's very doable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you said, how do we unlock the barriers?
Yes.
First, I would like to put emphasis on the corporate organizations, the big companies that work with SMEs. Because SMEs come, sometimes they come to us saying, okay, fine, the requirements are quite stringent and costly to them. And unfortunately, in some organizations that we've seen, the procurement department has no idea on how to implement ESG. And if you look at the KPIs, it's purely financially driven without a component of ESG. So one way of unlocking it is that corporate entities need to work very closely with their partners, SMEs. And since mainly the area of contact is mainly at the procurement stage, there needs to be a proper collaboration that sees that whatever ESG policies or initiatives the corporate entities are deploying should cascade down to the SMEs. So it's not fair for corporates to give reports annually about how good they are in ESG implementation, and that is not cascaded down to the SMEs. One challenge we get, SMEs are complaining, is that they're being pushed so hard on pricing, and as a result of that, it compromises on their ESG delivery. So when it comes to the environment side, when it comes to emissions, if you look at the social side, when it comes to employee safety, remuneration, from a corporate governance side, it's not too bad. But these are some of the areas that we are trying to inform our members, is that whatever they do and whatever they report on should also cascade to their partners. And in this regard, SMEs. Now, for another area that I would like to emphasize on is tech and ESG. I think there's a big opportunity for SMEs to tap into tech and use tech in terms of data collection when it comes to ESG reporting. There's a lot of data. My colleague talked about data inconsistencies, and that's a challenge when it comes to standardization, from not only from a national perspective, but also from a global perspective. If we can use tech, I'll give an example, like I'm also a director in one of the logistics companies, so I can give an example of a logistics company. If we bring in telematics, AI, into into drivers, into trucks, that is, heavy trucks, we're able to gain data about driver behavior, okay, safety, how they drive. We're able to get the speed what speed are they driving at, the emissions the car or the truck is emitting, and all that information you can use AI to gather that information and see how that information now is used to lower carbon emissions through transitioning to electric if you choose to go that direction, or if you choose to go to biofuels to bring down your emissions within your trucking business. Now, with that information, you're able to go to the bank if you're planning to expand and ask for financing. And some of the banks have green financing solutions, whereby you're able to get access to financing at competitive or lower interest rates that encourage the transitioning from high carbon emission to low carbon emission services. We can also repeat that in other sectors, like the agricultural sector, for the farmers who are doing a lot of irrigation. You go to the hotel services, like now in where we are now, that is the tourism and hospitality, in terms of the infrastructure, energy savings. So there's a lot of tech we can actually bring in into the ESG discussion to make sure that we take the leap forward. And Africa today and Kenya today is in a position, sometimes I say that is even much more advantageous to Europe and the advanced countries, because in those countries they have made heavy investments, and transitioning from the investments they've made, what I would call stranded assets, to ESG compliant assets is quite costly. So for us, we have that opportunity to grab technology and leapfrog into the future as SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've made a very important point there about the data specifically. And I wanted to throw this to the corporate ladies, both of you, because you do have an opportunity to do data collection, I would say, of the people that you engage with, that you're pushing to implement a lot of these ESG frameworks and practices, everything. What are some of the metrics that you would use to measure some of these implementation? And what are you seeing a lot of companies doing, both right and wrong, I would say, because then that translates to the kind of support that you're giving them. So my question to both of you essentially is, how can we, and what are the metrics that are being used to measure some of these, I would say, outputs and assessments to make sure that you know what is working and what isn't? And out of that, what are you seeing is actually working and isn't working?
Sure, so I can start on that. I think I failed to mention earlier that, so I work for KPMG.
Prices are not the best, fairly high, I would say. For example, in Ethiopia, the energy prices are super low. And when I was checking some of the data on Ethiopia as a country, they are getting massive amounts of US dollar payments for energy, for example, from Bitcoin mining data centers. They had a big dams. They built a big infrastructure, but the industry was not there to use the big amounts of energy. So Ethiopia government decided, okay, let's sell the energy to those Bitcoin miners, let them make pay in US dollars, and that will help, a lot to the country economy. Right. Oh, actually, 10 minutes, it did look like very little, but I still have more than half. All right, so a couple of words I want to say about this green energy thing. And here I'm gonna a little bit break the protocol, Many smart people say green this, green that, coal is bad, gas is bad. We need to make energy from wind, from solar, from things like this. Electric cars, it's not really true. Like if you read different scientists, researchers, then let's say burning the gas, it's bad. Let's make energy from solar. But what will happen with those solar panels after they become old? Where we will put them? In which country we will bring them and bury? It's gonna be very difficult to do something with it. What's gonna happen with those fancy electrical car batteries? Where are we gonna put when they become old? And how much water, how much different rare minerals it takes to build those batteries? So me personally, I know it's not a very popular topic. I think this green energy thing is not what many other people say. I kind of even think it's a lie. Let's take from another point of view, burning something like wood or gas that comes from planet Earth. How is it different with one volcano blowing up? How much different bad things it brings out the atmosphere? Can we control the Mother Earth? Can we stop all the volcanoes? No. What about animals? How much gases they bring from their bodies just by being alive? We need animals, we eat animals, that's our planet. So this green energy thinking to me is that we should not be going against our planet, the nature, and at the same time we should think, like in a critical kind of thinking. Is really the electrical cars so good for our planet? Is really the solar panels the answer for everything? In the day, yes, but what happens in the night? We don't have sun, we don't have energy from the solar panels. So getting into this technological advancement, I think it's going to be a mix. Yes, I think we need to do wind farms, we need to do solar panels, and we need to look into energy storage as well. Not in all countries there is geothermal energy, not in all countries there is a hydro energy, and of course we will depend more and more from energy in the nearest years. And getting back to the data center world, to regular people, the data center world is kind of hidden. We don't see it in a daily life. But those massive data centers, they are growing everywhere across the world. And getting back to this Africa land, 20% of the whole planet land. Africa people, 20% of the whole planet. I looked in, like if you type in Google, the true size of Africa. You can fit USA, you can fit China, India, like majority of Europe. So it's just unbelievable how much opportunities here in Africa are. And I think one of those things that Africa as a continent and all of